It's 5:30. I'll call the meeting to order. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. At this time, we'll consider adoption of the agenda. I have one modification. I'd like to move executive session number 1 to right after the consent agenda before the public hearings. The commissioners have any other modifications to the agenda?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, with that, then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the agenda as modified.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. The consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. At this time, I'd like to make a motion for executive session. I move we recess for an executive session for consultation with the city's attorney regarding ongoing litigation pursuant to the attorney-client exception KSA 75-4319B2. Those in attendance will be the commissioners, city attorney, city manager, and Fred Meyer. The time, 30 minutes, 20? 15, 20. We'll 20. Consider 20 minutes. We'll resume the meeting at 6:50. So do I have a
5:50,
second?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, 5:50. Excuse me, that's a long one.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. We're back in session. No action will be taken from executive session. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. Our first public hearing is for residents 209 South Earl. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Don?
Yes, I was waiting for the pictures to go catch up with the. There we go. So we had several complaints on this property from citizens, overgrown, neglected, different things. So we sent out a letter. We've not had any response back to the letters that I'm aware of. So we would like, it is staff's recommendation that we go forward with condemnation for this property to either work with the owner to get it rehabilitated or to move forward for removal if nothing will be done with it. I'm not sure if anybody's here for this property.
That's my next question. Is anyone here representing the property owner?
May I interrupt for just a second and point out that this screen's not working?
Oh.
I don't know if that's fixable, but it'd be nice to have. Thank you.
Is somebody going to look at it now, or we go on?
Let's go on.
Okay.
I can manage without it. Yeah.
Okay, next, anyone from the public want to address the commission during the public hearing?
First it's the doorknob, then it's the monitor. What's next? Don't ask, yeah. So Don, no contact with the owner at all?
No, no contact
At
from the
this
owner.
time, then I'll close the public hearing for commission discussion. There's been no contact.
No.
When do you do a title search to see if the,
Yes.
have you
Title
done the
searches.
title search?
Dave, I believe a title search has been done on this property. Yes.
And it didn't show up. I heard that the relatives inherited or got the property. That didn't show up anywhere in the legal documents then.
I believe it showed Laura Bell as the property owner. I think it had an issue with unpaid real estate taxes as well on it, but there was no mortgage on it.
But has she been sent notice? Is that who?
Yes.
Okay. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
So, any other questions of Don on this property from the commission?
I have none.
If there's no other questions, then I'll ask for a motion.
I move that 209 South Earl Street be condemned as dangerous and unsafe.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next, I'll open the public hearing for 717 Washington. Don?
Yeah, this is a property that we have received numerous complaints from neighbors. We also received a complaint from the fire. One of the members of our fire department had gone by there and saw that there was a tree in the backyard that's fallen on the roof. How long ago that happened, I don't know. If you can tell by one of the photos, at the rear of the property, the walls are starting to separate. There's holes through the siding into the home. I do not know how long it's been vacant and in this condition, but there's certainly our opinion that it is dangerous and unsafe, and it is staff's recommendation that we move forward with condemnation for 717 Washington.
At this time, I'll allow the property owner to address the hearing if they're present. Anyone representing the property owner here? Anyone in the public desire to address the public hearing? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open it for commission discussion.
Looks pretty far gone to me. I can't imagine any way to save it.
Yeah, it looks like it's well on its way to imploding on its own.
Yeah.
Anything? Then I'll call for a motion.
I move that 717 Washington Street be condemned as dangerous and unsafe.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Items for commission action. Item A, consider setting the date for a public hearing to consider condemnation of a structure at 417 South 6th on November 20, 2018 at 5:30 p.m.
Believe we received a call. Actually, the fire chief received a call about this. I think it was on or about August 16th, shortly after we had the heavy rains. That a portion of the wall, the brick wall underneath, we see the front porch. There's a brick wall underneath the front of the building. A portion of that had collapsed at the base and went into the basement, along with dirt and things that were underneath the porch. So we were called out to look at it. We found it to be unsafe and reviewed that with the owners. Told them that we need to move forward with getting some plans from an engineer or architect to repair that and move forward with getting that repair. They're agreeable to do that. But we told them with the condition that it is, we will need to move forward with this process if it's deemed necessary to do that. And this gives them approximately 3 months to try to get financing and different things secured and plans secured to get those repairs made. And we're confident that they will make repairs, but we need to, due to the dangerous condition of the house, also on the walls may not show it, but on the north wall, it is bowing out considerably, the wall. And there is a beam that runs across the building, the house to support it that is no longer in the pocket doing that it's intended to be in due to the wall on the north shifting and moving. So they have made temporary repairs to have it stabilized to go there, but not permanent repairs yet.
Is the owner present tonight?
I don't see them here. They were made aware of the meeting by letter, and I did visit with them personally to let them know that they're more than welcome to attend tonight, that tonight would be a scheduling meeting for future consideration for condemnation.
So are they proceeding with scheduling repairs now, or are they
Yeah,
going to
they're
wait?
working to get things in place, working to find a contractor, working to get some drawings for the contractor to use for repairs. So they're moving forward with that.
Great.
So what you're anticipating is by the time we have
We're anticipating by November 20th, we probably should have that in place.
Okay, so then at that, we would just be,
Most likely, if it's in place, we'll be asking to adjourn it to
okay.
a future date.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I have none.
No, sir.
With no further questions, then I'll call for a motion.
I move to set the date of November 20th, 2018 for a public hearing to consider a condemnation of the structure at 417 South 6th Street.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Don. The next item on the agenda is consider quotes received for a budgeted water line replacement at Main Street and Cement Street. Terry?
This is a line on Cement Street that runs north from Maple and goes up and dead ends. It serves West Star and the bus barn to the east of it. We have water quality issues there, low flow issues. And my intention is to go in and bring a 6-inch line from the north side of Main, come down and catch the 6-inch line on Maple. This will also set up for us to extend the line further south, which is part of our plan to increase the water quality and fire protection in that whole southeast part of town down there.
So right now, the line east of Cement Street seemed like in your notes said it dead-ended. It wasn't creating a loop as it will be after the work is completed.
Right. It'll create a loop through there, plus alleviating the water quality issues and increasing fire protection there.
Is a line that goes west at the east, or the south side of Main, is that going to a fire hydrant over there?
No,
short?
that will be a 2-inch. There's also a 2-inch line there at dead ends
Okay.
that we're going to pick up, so we can get rid of that dead end too.
So you have the 2-inch going along the south side of Main,
Yes.
and it'll tie back in
It'll-
somewhere west of there.
Right. It ties in. It burns, but it dead ends right there at that last house on the west side of Cement Street. So we're going to tie that together.
Any further questions from the commission?
No, sir.
No.
If there's no further questions, then I'll call for a motion.
I move that the commission approve the quote from TC Underground Incorporated in the amount of $48,095 for the water line work at Main and Cement Street.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Terry.
The next item on the agenda is consider a request from Harry Smith Precision Railway Equipment Company, LLC, in the City of Independence to rezone a tract of land from R2 Single Family Dwelling District to M1 Light Industrial District at 800 to 814 South 19th Street.
Mayor, the Planning Commission reviewed this request and held a public hearing on September 4th, which they recommended approval. At one time, this was M1, and then it was rezoned to R2, thinking there would be some residential development in that area, and now all of the structures that were there are all gone. They're shown on this aerial because it's from 2016, but those structures are all gone now. It's all vacant.
So do they own the property in the M1 and the M2 zone?
They own the M2, but they own the lot south of that's M1, but the very corner lot with the structure, they do not own that one.
It looks like from the aerial there's two structures there on the corner.
This one they don't own. I don't know if you can see that. Sorry about that.
Okay.
They don't own that. Somebody's turned that into a residence. It was originally a commercial type place. They own this one. And then there's one lot up here that they don't own. It's like right here. But the Planning Commission initiated rezoning to that, so we wouldn't have a spot zoning issue.
Right. And there was no objection from any of the residents?
No, I haven't received any, nor from the owner of that lot,
Pardon me.
nor from the owner of that one lot.
Any further questions from the commission? If there's no further questions at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt an ordinance rezoning 800 through 814 South 19th Street from R2 Single Family Dwelling District to M1 Light Industrial District.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is to consider a request from Harry Smith Precision Railway Equipment Company, LLC, in the City of Independence. Consider request for no parking stalls for a storage building to be constructed in the 800 block of South 19th Street that will have no vehicular access.
And this is on a similar part of the area. Actually, my mouse to work here. They would actually use part of this lot that he owns here, and then part of these lots. And this is where the storage building would be constructed. And they do not plan on having any vehicular access. It would just be with a forklift, and it would just be storage only. It was kind of a unique situation. And in reviewing it with the city attorney, we determined that we could go to the Planning Commission because it didn't really fit in the off-street parking regulations listed uses. And so there's a process you can go through on that. And so this is the process. The Planning Commission recommended approving his request, and we're bringing it to you.
Is any representative from Precision Railway Equipment here tonight? Would you like to comment or?
Well, pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to be a storage building with no access. Going to move parts from our existing building over to the storage. So that's all it's going to be used for.
Okay. I just wanted to offer you the opportunity if you wanted to, so that's great. It is pretty simple. I like the solution that, sometimes when we look at our zoning ordinance, they're pretty specific on requirements, but they don't really look at the practical needs or function of the building. And I think this is a good example where a storage building, you can kind of get that cross of interpreting maybe for parking spaces, but the reality it's not necessary. So, why task a building owner or a developer with the cost of providing something that's not necessary? I think there's areas that dealing with existing conditions such as this, where you've got an established plant, you can run into cases like this, and in the manufacturing area particularly, where you look at the size of equipment or the needs. Some of our ordinances don't address that, and I like to see what's happening, that the Planning and Zoning Commission is considering the total picture and trying to accommodate industry, because we really appreciate your business in town and want to encourage and help any way possible that we can see you to grow and prosper. And putting money in parking areas that aren't necessary is not the way to help your bottom line. And I think this is a great solution that the Planning and Zoning has brought to us. Commissioner comments or questions?
Agree, absolutely.
And the Planning Commission is having a hearing Tuesday on relating to this, to the parking.
Okay. So have the Planning and Zoning, what do you mean they're having a meeting to?
To review the off-street parking requirements, particularly as it relates to industrial zoned areas.
Okay.
They had it in
industrial
July
zone.
and it was tabled to October.
Okay. This kind of is similar to what we addressed with the county. Remember the parking lot there being gravel. All their other parking lots are gravel. So
That one's zoned residential though, so it would
Yeah.
need to be rezoned.
yeah. So good. If there's no further questions, then I'll call for a motion.
I move to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to authorize no parking stalls for a storage building to be constructed in the 800 block of South 19th Street that will have no vehicular access.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next item on our agenda is to consider an agreement for access to cemetery property by Larson and Associates to install a monitoring well. Jeff, since you've had contact, would you like to?
Probably 2 or 3 times a year, we get requests from companies that contract with KDHE to put in monitoring wells to check for underground movement of hydrocarbons, oils, and gasolines around. Usually it's around gas stations that have been closed. I don't know what the criteria is and how they determine where they're going to put the wells, but this particular contractor is called Larson and Associates, and we have kind of a standard contract that we ask them to sign. Usually they're in the street and alley right-of-ways. This time it happened to be in the cemetery, so we added some language so that Jim Bennett, our sexton, would have some control and supervision about and be notified so we can make sure there are no privacy issues or encroachment upon grave sites. But other than that, it's a standard agreement.
It seemed like, I don't remember if it was in their data or some of your comments that they were proposing to go in a road area instead of.
That's correct. They're not going to, they were careful about that. I think there's some leeway on where they can locate, and it's going to be on one of the gravel road areas.
And looking at their map, you can see the wells around the abandoned gas station, and they're all west of Penn Avenue, but with the cemetery, there's none shown of monitoring progression of the
There's just that.
hydrocarbons to the east.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see why they would want to look at that. Any questions from the commissioners?
I have none.
Nope.
If there's no further questions, then I'll call for a motion.
I move that we approve an agreement for access to the cemetery property by Larson and Associates to install monitoring wells.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item on our agenda, reports, an update on water treatment plant project. Terry, do you want to?
I have Sarah Unruh here from PEC that is the project manager, and she's put together a timeline on things and is here to give you a report on where we're at and where we're going.
Okay.
No, your TV is not working, so we do have copies here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'm Sarah Unruh with PEC. We are the engineer on this particular project. So the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of remind everyone of what the total scope of work was for our contract. It's at the tip top of your page as well. So the scope of work for this project, it is something that is being funded through the KDHE, which is Kansas Department of Health and Environment, their loan program. And so our first task with this job was to complete all of that loan application process. The initial application of requesting funding from the state had already been done, but all of the paperwork and all of the environmental reviews and all those kinds of things that they require as part of that process needed to be done. So we did that process. As part of the loan process, KDHE requires that you prepare a preliminary engineering report, which is basically a report that says this is what the issues are and this is how we plan to address them, so that they can approve your concept before you start design work. The other part of this was to put together a design memo because there were other concerns at the water treatment plant that had been brought up. And the original request for proposals that went out to engineers identified specific things that you wanted to be investigated at the water plant and kind of see what the extent of the issues were and what could be done about those. So we specifically listed those. The first was modifications to the administration building to determine how you could get some additional space in there for break rooms, shower facilities, and then still accommodate the existing laboratory and office spaces. There was also an inspection of the settling basin. There's a very large settling basin there at the plant. There had been noticed some leakage and some potential structural issues. So part of that was to drain that basin and get a contractor out to inspect that, and our structural engineer and make recommendations for repairs. The clarifier that is at the water plant, same thing, just have somebody come out and inspect that. And we had a manufacturer's representative come out and take a look at that and give recommendations for repairs on that as well. And then the final thing that was involved in that design memo was looking at options for security at the facility. There's a real short little chain link fence around most of the facility, and so we looked at some more secure fencing options. And so that design memo was prepared to kind of take a look at those things and give recommendations and cost estimates for those. And the purpose of that was the full loan is $3.1 million that you've signed the agreement with KDHE. And so the purpose was to determine once the electrical improvements that we were doing the design work for was done and bid, and we knew what those funds were, that we knew how much was left over, and you could look at what other things you could potentially do at the water treatment plant to address other concerns with the loan that you had established with KDHE. So the design project that we actually have right now is for electrical improvements. And so our contract included the design work to be included with that, and then also bidding, construction administration, and on-site inspection services. So then what you got here, I kind of divided out into two parts, kind of the outline, the progression of where we started and where we are now. In two parts. The first part is the design, and then the second part is the loan. So we'll talk about the top part, the design first, which is what Kelly's got up here on the screen. The contract was originally approved at the commission meeting in July 27th of 2017 is when this whole project started. We had internal meetings to get our ducks in a row, and then we came and met with the city staff to go through and kind of finalize our scope and make sure that we were all on the same page of what you guys were looking for. And so then we started with our field investigation work. So we came out in October of 2017, and we had a contractor come out and do some core drills, drill some core holes in the existing settling basin so we could get a good picture of what exactly was there and what we were dealing with. So we did that field investigation, and at the same time, that's when the manufacturer's representative came and took a look at the clarifier operation as well. And then we put together, we had hired an architect as part of this job and had them put together some concept floor plans for the administration building to accommodate the facilities that the city was looking for. So we provided those to the city, and then all of that went into this design memo that we put together, and that design memo was provided in November of last year. At the same time, in November of last year, we also provided our 30% design documents to the city for the electrical work at the plant. And then we were asked also, we went through those 30% plans with the city in December. So about a month later, we went through those plans with the city. And then we came and attended the park board meeting in January of this year to go through those fencing options with them and get their thoughts. We were asked by the commission to go talk to them and see what their input would be if that project moved forward in the future. So we came down and attended that. It was myself and our landscape architect. Came down and attended that meeting. And then we had the draft preliminary engineering report that was submitted in January to the city for review. And then we followed up with our 90% design documents in March. At that same time, in March was when we also made our initial contact with Westar Energy. Part of the electrical project, just to kind of give you a rundown of what all we're doing in that part of project, there are remote sites. We have 6 of them. There are the towers and lift stations and pump stations out in the city, and all of those needed some new communication equipment to be able to communicate back to the water plant. And so this project involved replacement of parts and pieces at those sites so that those communications could be more stable and reliable. We are also, the big piece of this is relocating the power feed. Right now, the power feed to the plant is in the floodplain. And so there was a lot of coordination with Westar to figure out where they wanted to move that, how they wanted it to look, the type of poles, all those kinds of things. So that's a big piece of this project. Then we're also replacing all the main electrical gear at the plant, the motor control center gears. And we're also replacing motor control centers and panels in the high service pump station and low service pump station. Those 2 pump stations there at the plant, the one that brings the water in and the one that takes it back out. We also improved some site lighting, some additional site lighting that was requested by the city, and then finally a 600 kilowatt generator to run the facility in the event of a power outage. So all of that is what's included in this electrical project. That's all what's has been designed so far. So we submitted those 90% drawings to the city for review in March, and then we met with the staff a few weeks later in March to go through those and address any comments. And then our on-site meeting with Westar to everybody get on the same page and be at the site and look at what we're dealing with was held on April the 6th. And then we're going to skip down just a little bit. We received the final communication back from Westar of what they wanted and where they wanted things to go in July, so July 12th. So we had about a 3-month lead time there from the initial discussions with Westar down to when we got our final approval so we could put together our final plans to be able to send those to the state. So we had about a 3-month gap there. But in between that time, we did receive KDHE approval of our preliminary engineering report, so that gave us the go-ahead to be able to go ahead and submit plans once we had our final coordination done with Westar. So we provided our final plans to the city the end of July, and then with review comments, we didn't have anything that we needed to address, so we went ahead and sealed those and sent them on to KDHE. So the plans and specifications are sent to KDHE on September the 7th. I did confirm that they received them and they have been assigned to someone to review. I do not have any sort of deadline from KDHE of when those will be back. It just depends on how much is on whoever's desk at the time and where it is in the queue. But I did confirm that they do have them and they are in the queue. So our intent is to get back with KDHE every couple weeks and make sure and see where they're at in the process and just keep that communication going. Most of the review time on the water side from KDHE has been anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks in general. We've seen some over the last few years that have taken up to 12 weeks, but it's back down quite a bit over the last probably 6 months, so it's more in that 4 to 8 week time frame is typical. They've got a lot going on up there and not a lot of staff, and so it takes a little longer to get some review things back. But that review is required as part of the loan agreement, and it's also required simply because we're doing something with the public water supply system. So KDHE has to review those before we're allowed to bid the project. So those are all with KDHE at this point in time. As soon as we receive any comments back from KDHE, if there are any comments we need to address, then we'll address those comments and send revised plans and specifications back to get approval. As soon as we have approval to bid, then we will contact the city and say, when do you want to set this bid date out? The loan does require that things be advertised for 30 days. So once we pick that bid, when you want to bid it, it will be a 30-day time frame before you can accept those bids. So that bid period has to be advertised for 30 days. During that time frame, we will conduct a pre-bid conference, which is where we will require the contractors to actually come out to the site, visit the site, and we kind of go through the project, make sure they understand it, gives them an opportunity to ask questions and that kind of thing, and then we issue minutes from that, and then any addendums that are required because of comments or questions that we get during that bid period. And then we'll accept the bids and open those at the time, the designated bid time. The second piece down here is the KDHE loan. This is a kind of a lengthy process, but there's a lot of different parts and pieces involved. So like I mentioned at the beginning, before we came on board, the city had already made the request with KDHE to say, hey, we want a loan for some projects we're going to do, and this is the amount we'd like to request. Then you go through, once KDHE says, yes, we're going to put you on the list, then you go through the whole actual application process. So you can see here that we submitted the full application to KDHE at the end of March this year, and you guys received the loan for execution at the end of August. In that time frame, we supplied all the information that KDHE asked for. There are 12 agencies that are required to review the project from an environmental standpoint as part of the loan. So we draft a letter, send that out to all those 12 agencies, and then get their responses back and provide those to KDHE as part of our documentation for the loan. So doing all of that and then getting all of the loan application stuff off to KDHE. After we had the initial submittal to KDHE, they came back to us a few weeks later and requested some additional documentation. Some of that was stuff from us that we provided and some clarification, and then there was some additional financial information from the city that was requested. And so all of that was provided to KDHE all by the 1st of May, and then again, like I said, the end of August is when you receive the actual loan agreement for execution. So I guess with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Have you heard back from Westar as to where they're at as far as having all their material on hand?
I have not. The last communication that we had with them directly, like I said, was the end of July when they gave us the final location of everything and how they wanted it to go so that we could finish off our plans. So we can contact them again and find out kind of what their schedule is for getting materials on site for that part of the process.
Okay. Mm-hmm. At one time they had mentioned that they would need to order a steel pole, and I believe they informed me it was about a 12-week delay or process to acquire that, and I was just curious if that has been done by Westar.
I do not know the answer. I'm not sure. I will find out. Okay. But I will tell you that that isn't something that would necessarily delay the project, right, simply because that the electrical gear takes that long as well to get all that kind of stuff in. But I will find out from Westar and let you guys know.
Okay.
Have we firmed up the budget any?
At this point in time, our budget is about 1.4 to 1.5 million. What we will do once we get any comments from KDHE, we kind of wait to refine our budget down to that final engineer's estimate until we get any comments, just to make sure we cover everything. So once we get any comments from KDHE, we will supply you guys with the final engineer's estimate for the project. But that's the range that we're in at this point in time. And the total loan is for 3.1 million. So.
And we're not trying to spend all.
No, certainly not. I just wanted to give you
Right.
perspective of what we were looking at spending of the total loan that you've requested. Terry
Yeah.
wants to get it all, but
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I know.
Is that generator size to carry the entire plant?
Yes.
Or?
Mhm.
Thank you.
It seems like it's taken a long time that, when we discussed it initially, the primary concern was the electrical. And I guess I kind of anticipated the push to be on the electrical to get the drawings out. Because, when you look at that portion of the design, it's not really that involved. It goes fairly quick. But, we're over a year, and with the equipment in the state it is, we're on borrowed time, and we're still now looking at 12-week, up 8 to 12, 2 to 3 months review, 30 days to bid, then ordering materials, shop drawings, contract. We can be another 2 to 3 months. That I hope there's some good prayers that can pray that thing stays together. Because we're that critical that I just had hoped that we had to push harder to get that part through and approved than looking at a interior renovation and the fence. I guess when you're turning on your faucet wondering if you'll get water, it's a little different than designing it. But
And it sounds like we're still another 6 months out, right, from construction?
I would say, I can't speculate on exactly when we'll get things back.
Oh,
from
you can
KDHE.
speculate.
I can
Right,
speculate,
sure.
yes. I would anticipate that we would see things back from KDHE probably maybe in the next couple weeks. That's what I would hope for. And if that's the case, then we can bid. And again, it's a 30-day advertisement. We can't get around that
Right.
part. So we're looking at maybe 2 months before a contractor's on board. And then depending on how long it takes to get gear. I
Right.
don't think the construction time, from what I kind of understand from our electrical engineer, the construction time itself is not the big piece. The big piece here is, as far as length of time, the big thing, though, is that you've got to be careful of what you're putting in and what you're taking out, because you've got to make sure to continue to run everything as you go. So you've got to switch things over in a very very calculated sequence to make sure that everything is still running. And we've talked to city staff about how best to do that, and that's the way things are written, so that we can minimize, the amount of time that it takes for the contractor to do all that work and get this stuff going. To your point about the time frame, I know I certainly understand, which is why we, the design was only for the electrical, because that was the key big thing that needed to be taken care of right away while we were investigating the other pieces. I guess in this instance, it doesn't seem like a lot because you're just replacing equipment, but to make sure that you get the right equipment, that you're hooking everything back up the way it's supposed to be hooked up, and we show that correctly on our plans, making sure we had the coordination with the integrator that the city has chosen, Pedrati, to work with on the SCADA system, making sure we had everything coordinated with them for all those remote sites, and that their quotes and their scopes matched up with what we expected to see. And then, of course, the coordination with Westar took quite a while as well. Unfortunately, we can't complete those plans until all those things are coordinated and figured out. And, we've got there's a lot of parts and pieces and a lot of people at the table to try and make all of that happen. And so, at this point in time, like you said, I would expect or hope that we would get things back from KDHE, in the next few weeks. And so we'd be looking at being able to, award a contract hopefully in the next 2 months.
yeah, it should be a simpler review since you're just dealing with electrical. You're not dealing with actual
Correct.
the purification of the water and the routing of that. Basically, you're looking at setting new distribution panels, getting the primary brought into it, and then the connection to cross over. And it shouldn't be, like you said, not much time to install, and even the crossover will be able to, it'll have to be done in a few hours.
Correct, and we've
So-
talked with city staff about all of that, whole process about how long the contractor has to do each part and piece, and all of that. Once a contractor's on board, there'll be a very, very detailed meeting to work all of that out. So there's a very distinct plan before anything occurs at the site to make sure nothing, is taken down longer than it needs to be, or not longer than it can be. And yes, the actual review time should be fairly short when it gets to KDHE. The hard part is getting it to the top of whoever's pile, that it's in at the time. So it just depends on how many things are on top of it. Once it gets to the point and we get it, yes, I agree, it should be a pretty quick review since it is electrical and it's not a process-driven project at this point in time. But it's, getting it through their queue process that takes the time. So.
And we just got to have the time.
Well, like I said, from our end of
Yeah.
things, we'll be contacting them. I can't contact them too often,
know.
or then I become a pester, and then I don't like to say it goes down the pile, but I certainly don't want to ever, So we usually keep in contact with them every couple weeks to make sure. I gave them a couple weeks to make sure they had it, then checked and make sure that it had been assigned to a reviewer. We did that last week, so we'll just kind of keep in touch and make sure that we're in front of them so they know that it's important. But again, it's just when it comes to the top of the pile.
Right. Any questions?
None for me, sir.
No more for me.
Thank you
Okay.
for coming.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is city manager's comments. Any?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a brief comment about the ransomware, a little update on that. I wasn't here yesterday. They had a conference call with the forensic cyber computer gurus that are investigating the ransomware and how it potentially happened. I haven't heard any results. They're not finished yet, and I haven't talked to Mike today about how that conference call went, but they are working on it. I see emails going back and forth all the time. So they're working on it. We should be getting a report for that fairly soon. And just second to that, again, I want to thank the staff, especially Dave Cowan, and then the rest of the department heads, and the people in City Hall that responded to the cyber attack, i.e. they gave up their computers for 36 hours. And especially our consultant. Without them, we would have been lost, because in terms of recovery and moving forward, especially with the forensic cyber company that we're working with, and they're working together very well. That's why I see these communiques between our consultant and the forensic firm, and they're right on top of everything. So anyway, that's the quick update.
So it's fair to say we had very little damage.
Right, we lost, I think, about a couple of hours of transactions that before we knew what was happening, that they'd put in and couldn't get back. But everything else, we'd backed up a couple of hours earlier, so we had everything backed up to that point. So we really didn't lose any significant data. We didn't lose any data,
Right.
just some transactions.
Had to re-enter some of it.
Right.
Oh, that's amazing. Dodged a bullet, it sounds like to me.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is commissioners' comments.
Yeah.
I have none, Mr. Mayor.
I do. There's a community cleanup on October the 6th, which is a Saturday, and it's been in the paper, and I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, especially those that don't get a newspaper anymore. But it's also the same day that recycling is, and it gives the citizens an opportunity to get rid of unwanted things that they've had sitting in the garages, or hopefully not on their front porches, but I've seen some on some front porches that need to be cleaned up. So I'm hoping that the citizens do take advantage of what the city provides. And my other comment is that whether people realize it or not, if you have brush that needs to be picked up, you need to call it in. Just strictly putting it out by the curb will not get it picked up. So, if, in case you didn't know that, call the city. You'll get on a list. I have no, they don't give you a timeline as far as when they're going to come out and pick up your brush, but you go on a list and they will eventually work down that list and get to you. So, if you have a brush pile and you didn't call in and you're wondering why it's still there, it's going to be there probably till you know what freezes over unless you call in. So please call in.
You can also go on the website and you can turn it in through the website. So if it's after hours, but the city has a mobile app and you can use that as well. So you don't just have, you can call in or you can use the website.
Thank you, Kelly. That's all I had.
Okay. We talked about a public forum. We were looking at our dates, remote locations. I think what we need to look at is a protocol for the meeting. I think Jeff had sent us some information on our ordinance. At the next commission meeting, I'd like for us to go over the protocol, look at that. With a public forum, I think we need to maybe modify where if people are going to present to us with questions, because according to the ordinance, it says we can't respond or we will not respond. I think if we're going to have a forum, we need to have some response, but we need to look at an acceptable time and also look at limiting number of times a particular person can address the commission so that we allow everyone or as many people as want to address the commission can do that. Another thing maybe to consider is the length of time. I think if when we schedule it, we'll establish either somewhere like an hour or an hour and a half time frame so that it doesn't continue going on. We'll call it to open the session and then close at a specific time. So I'd like to have on our agenda at the next commission meeting our thoughts on how we can modify and what we can establish. Then with that, once we get it established, we can post it on the website, maybe the Facebook for sure, and in the papers, so the public, when they come, would know how we're planning to conduct the meeting. That we do want input, but we need to have it controlled and managed. Another thing, I visited with some of the area commissioners, and we had talked also that they're interested in having a joint commission meeting to discuss ways that we can come together, look at planning situation, just brainstorm how we can work and maybe collectively look at combinations that would reduce our taxes, how we could save, that each of us could trim our budgets. And I don't know what Gary and Lewis, your thoughts are. If you are, I could make contact with the commissioners that I've spoke to and then reach out to Cherryville and Caney's commission.
So you've spoken to somebody from Coffeyville?
Yeah.
And the people you spoke to were interested?
Yeah, and same with the county.
Be worth a shot. It'd be great if we could pull it off.
It's no commitments,
Yeah,
but it's just a time,
Yeah.
To let us look and at the big picture, countywide or regional wise.
Sure.
So
Who's going to run the meeting, though?
that's what we need to
Arm wrestle for
look
it.
at. Yeah, coin toss or
I think that
something
would be
like that.
amazing.
If you're interested, I can
Yeah.
see if they're seriously interested or just conversationally interested. Okay. Some of the things we've talked also in the past with a policy of bidding setting some minimum standards, minimum bids requirements, or from our contractors across the board, minimum insurance, bonds. At what point do we want to require a contractor to have a performance bond? It's not every project needs that, but some standard that could help. That
We don't have anything for that now.
nothing that's in writing, and also the county has. I don't know if you'd call it an ordinance or a policy dealing with contractors within the county. They're allowed
It's a local
preference.
Local preference. It's called typically local preference.
And whether that's something we want to look at, it can kind of stimulate some of the local contractors that might have a little higher overhead, but it does give them a benefit. But I think it's some things that we need to maybe look at as we've had a lot of projects, large projects that come in with just one bidder, and establishing many. That way, it keeps our consultants active and on the phone to call some generals or call some subs that we can get more competitive bids and just better use of our money. And I noticed there was some comments in our last audit update about a procurement policy. I know you said you were working on that. I think
Right.
if you could bring that up, it all kind of ties together.
Bidding, actually, could be part of your purchasing policy, procurement policy, would be a subsection on bidding or bidding out projects that would have that. It certainly would have a local preference in there. It would talk out when you could lay out, when do you have to go to bid, when don't you have to go to bid, and so forth, or can you just get 3 quotes on a simpler project? So that, and we're nearly, I don't know, David and Mike have been working on a purchasing policy. That's one of our first key ones that we want to get developed, and they run. You can see, I've got lots of examples, and some of them are 10 pages, some are 50 pages. So we don't want to be too complicated, but. And we were just talking the other day about local preference. Actually, some cities had it, have had it, and done away with it. But there's pros and cons to that. We'll certainly discuss those.
Yeah, and one thing with the bidding, the advantage is you can almost make out an outline. So they're like Terry on the water line. It would have all the information for minimum insurance, if bonds are required, and all he has to do is go through and mark it and check it, and then can send it out and deal with where the bid's delivered, sealed bids required, so that it helps the bidder know that if they're sealed, then my competitor's not going to have a chance to get my information and undercut me. But it just makes it easier for us to secure prices. So that was some things that I think we're going to help us be more efficient and hopefully then cut our expenses, that we can look at some savings back to our citizens. But those were the items and comments that I had. So October 11th is our next meeting, so we'll have the ideas for a forum. I've had 2 different groups that have been excited when they saw us talk about it, that they're willing to open up their facilities for us to come. And they're saying, hey, you schedule it, we'll go do door to door. So help advertise the meeting. So, okay, with that, next item on the agenda is public concerns, but I didn't receive any requests, so we'll move on to executive session. At our next executive session, I'd like to make a motion that we recess for an executive session for discussion of an employee's performance pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception, KSA 75-4319B. Item 1, let's say resume at 7:05.
15 minutes, basically?
Yeah.
Is that enough?
And we can always come back and
Okay.
go back out if it's not. So, and those attending would be the commissioners and the city manager.
Can I have,
Wow.
the city attorney's welcome to come. I wouldn't mind if he was there, unless you.
I think we're just kind of finishing
Process.
where we left off the process. I
Okay.
don't see a need for Jeff to be included. So I got a motion. on
I'll
the
second.
table. Got a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. I don't know. It hasn't been used yet. It's there. I don't know. Yeah, the commission is back in session. There's no action taken from executive session. And next item on the agenda is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Who was the first?
I was. He was.
Yeah.
Silent motion.
Motion, yes.